Hello, this is Skylit Lake reading Super Science by thatchickendude. Chapter 49, Attack of the Yakuza, Part 5. After seeing the man turn into a monster, the two scientists made haste and began to run deep within the facility to try and outpace the monster. They did their best to run as fast as they could and take as many sudden turns as they could to throw off the thing, but it always seemed to know where they were and crash its huge feet through the building in an attempt to crush them while screaming at the top of its very human lungs. Once they got away from the last of the attempted stompings, Izuku stressed his concern to Egon. "Egon, what will we do?" Izuku asked him breathlessly. "What's it look like? Keep running or we'll get crushed," Egon told him as he tried to put off even more speed. "What about Eri and the girls?" Izuku exclaimed while trying to keep pace. "That's why we're going deeper into the facility, to draw him away from them," Egon half yelled at him, making Izuku gain a relieved expression. "The only question is how to beat that thing. By the time any hero strong enough to deal with it shows up, we'll all be crushed," Egon stressed as they both made a sharp right. "We have to throw everything at it," Izuku offered. "Everything is broken or offline. Anything that is left has been absorbed by that thing's body," Egon shouted back as a huge fist hit the ceiling, but didn't break through. Suddenly, Egon got a call on his phone, and as he picked it up, Pura began to say, "Sir, why has a giant monster—" But Egon cut her off and exclaimed, "No time for that. Send an announcement to evacuate." In slight panic, she yelled and then replied, "Yes, sir." "Give me the girl," roared Overhaul as he tried to rip a chunk off the roof, stalking the building and knocking the scientists off their feet. "Oh god, so what can we do now?" Izuku rapidly looked around, saw something, and stated, "I got it." "You do? Tell me," Egon exclaimed as he grabbed his shoulders. Izuku went to a wall and pulled away a panel while typing in numbers. After hitting the enter key, the floor opened and what looked like a mini bullet train appeared, only as big as a carnival ride for two. Egon looked at the device connected to a magnetic line under the floor and pointed at it wordlessly. "It's a work in progress. It's a way to make travel around the facility faster. Get in," Izuku explained and exclaimed in the same sentence. The two jumped in, pulled the lever forward, and the small cart went off down the long hallway like a blur. At this point, Overhaul broke enough of the roof to peek in and see nothing in the room. He grunted, let the roof go, and went somewhere else to search for them. The two scientists' ride came to a crashing halt as they flung from their seats and crashed into a wall, leaving them disoriented. "Work in progress, eh?" Egon asked as stars danced in front of his eyes. "Yeah, work in progress," Izuku confirmed as birds flew around his eyes. After getting back to their feet from the nasty escape, Egon summarized, "Don't suppose you have anything in mind to beat that thing?" Izuku thought for a long moment and suddenly an idea shone through his head. Grabbing the man, he told him in a serious voice, "I need 2 assassin drones and an illusion splinter." "But the assassin drones aren't ready yet," said Hatsume's voice as he came through the other hallway with an injured Cho and rapper Starro. "Hatsume, Cho, and Starro?" Egon said in the order of relief to confusion. "What happened?" he asked, while looking at them. "Long story. What is going on? What's all that crashing and exploding?" Cho answered and asked back. "No time for that." Izuku cut them off before going to Hatsum and asking in a feverish, fast tone, "Hatsum, it's time for a field test, and I have no time to spare." Hatsum put on his glasses with one glass and with one hand and said excitedly, "You're the boss, boss." As Hatsum gave Cho to Rapastaro and ran off to fetch the robots, Egon looked out of a carrying case full of splinters and gave the illusion to Izuku, after which he asked him, "What else?" Izuku gave a serious look with a smile and told him affirmatively, "Time to bring out the big guns." A little while later, Izuku had everything he needed and made his way to the paddocks in the animal division. There, he stood before one of the large ones and took a deep breath. Sure, the one he needed was more than tame, but even domesticated animals react violently when stressed. Plus, he hadn't seen this one in quite a while since his burnout. So he woke himself up and unlocked the huge warehouse-sized door. Slowly it opens, and the first thing he feels is its hot breath hitting his face, followed by amber eyes that burned like coal. He steeled his nerves and said, "Hey, buddy." A grunt of dissatisfaction came back with an underlying tone of fear. Izuku felt pity and carefully said back, "I know all the noise freaks you out, but we're in danger, and you're the only one that can help. Can you do it?" A moment of silence and a slight purr. Then a tongue barely stuck out and gave a long, forced tongue lick to his face. "Good boy," Izuku praised the creature as he began to walk out of his enclosure, and Izuku said in an amazed tone, "Good big boy." Back with Overhaul, he was continuing his rampage as he smashed his huge feet through the roofs or prying them open to take a look inside for his quarry. Getting more and more upset the less he could spot a single living thing, he eventually just roared out, "Izuku, Egon, where are you? Give me the girl." "Hey, ugly," called out a familiar voice, causing Overhaul to turn around and come face to face with Torchwick, now 3 times the size of a mammoth, standing on the rooftop, glaring daggers at him, with a familiar green-eyed boy and red-eyed girl. "If you want her, come and get her," Izuku announces, as he held up the same thing in front of him like an enticing treat. Torchwick wastes no time in shooting a fireball at the monster, making Overhaul use his giant arm to block it. The fire was so hot and intense that his arm exploded almost clean off and went up in fire despite being made of stone and metal. Overhaul looked at the limb and saw how it burned to a stump and had calcified from the fire. Knowing it was useless and could be regenerated, he sawed off the stump and a new limb grew back. After the limb regrew, he saw how Torchwick spread its wings and took off into the air. Overhaul pursued the creature and roared, "You fucking lizard, I'll kill you." Egon and a few other scientists watched as the young man rode away on the back of the dragon, the girl in tow, with the monster man chasing after. Seeing the most pressing issue at hand walk away, he fell to the floor and sighed in relief. The damage to the facility had been enormous. Nearly half of it was completely gone to Overhaul's transformation, or him just breaking it, and the other half sustained severe damage, something he was extremely grateful for. "Professor," the voice of Honey Lemon screamed as she ran into the now open part of the laboratory. From her view, Egon looked dead for a moment, but once he sat up, she looked much more relieved. Standing, the man said back, "Honey Lemon, are you okay?" The woman ran up to him with teary eyes, and she nodded rapidly and answered, "I'm fine, but what is Dr. Midoriya doing on Torchwick with Eri? Aren't you supposed to keep her away from him?" The woman began to panic, but Egon took her hand and reassured her. "Don't worry, Miyazaki, he's got a plan." She sighed and replied, "I hope so." Looking out towards the open sky where the dragon took off towards the city, she lamented, "Oh, Doctor, you're so brave." "Gee, thanks, Honey Lemon," Izuku's voice said behind her. Honey Lemon whipped around and grabbed the boy in a hug while yelling in happy relief, "Izuku!" Remembering her status, she backed away and said more appropriately, Doctor, and Eri?" "Hi!" the little girl said, back with a tiny shy way. "Wait, I thought you were on the dragon," she asked while pointing back and forth between the sky and the two kids. "Nope," Izuku answered. "Well, if you're here, who's that?" she asked while looking up at the sky. "A nasty surprise I have for Overhaul. Come on, let's evacuate while we can," Izuku told the other personnel around him. "Wait, what about the animals? No doubt they've gotten out. Few of them are dangerous to the public." "Don't worry, Pete and Gareth have managed to herd them up," Pura, who joined them from another hallway, informed and assured them. "Even the flying ones? Wow!" Anima, who was beside her, said in an impressed tone. "Never mind that. Let's go." Just as they were fleeing towards the entrance, Honey Lemon brings up a concern. "What about Torchwick? Sure, he's gotten bigger and tougher, but I don't think he could take that monster one-on-one." Izuku shakes his head, clearly not pleased with it either, as he tells her, "We don't have a choice. Everything has been compromised, and we need to get to safety. We have nothing else to throw at it." "Not everything," a familiar voice tells them. Coming to a halt, they turn fast to see Hankoyo standing in another hallway outside of where Ongliot was being kept. Egon sighs and says, "Hankoyo, good to see you, well, mostly." He trails off while looking at his black eye. "I hope you don't mean Ongliot. You know she's too big to leave that chamber unless her area was observed when Overhaul became that thing." "Well, it's not like she can break out. I specifically made those walls made triple thick to protect the Singularity Soul. Curse my planning ahead. Maybe not her, but her kids can," Hankoyo says, back with a sly smile. "Kids? She gave birth?" Egon exclaimed in surprise and horror as the man pointed to the door behind him. Going inside, he sees a huge Ongliot filling the room with black webs and a few small spiders around her legs. They look like Ongliot herself, but smaller, with Ongliot being the size of a small horse. "Oh my god, she did! How did you know that? Never mind. How many did she have?" "Enough," Hankoyo says with a knowing grin and chuckle. Izuku raises an eyebrow and asks, "How much is enough?" Hankoyo points to the room again, and Izuku gives Eri over to Honey Lemon. He pokes his head in and sees only the first few walking around Ongliot's legs, but then he looks up to see thousands of red eyes looking back at him, making Izuku freeze up with his mouth wide open. This was enough. Chapter 50. Attack of the Yakuza, Part 6, Final. This is Yuri Takahashi reporting from Central Mustafu. This just in, a giant monster has suddenly been spotted battling a fire-breathing dragon with what appears to be two people riding its back. The two monsters are rampaging through the town in an attempt to kill one another. The police are first on the scene to guide and protect the citizens, and the heroes have been called to aid in the fight. More in a bit. And All Might, wherever you are, we need you now more than anything, the reporter begged on a jumbotron as the overhaul abomination slammed down first into it, shattering the screen to pieces and causing it to fall to the street below as people ran for their lives. Torchwick tried to crash into the huge monster, but Overhaul managed to move out of the way in time, causing the dragon to soak into the building. He roared and flew off, only to circle and begin his assault with fireballs. This time, Overhaul used more stone than flesh to block it, and didn't end up losing as much as the first time. Shedding off the melted stone, he firmed up the arm into a blunt weapon and prepared to strike. But Torchwick, pulling an aircraft maneuver, flew around the giant, breathing rings of fire. The fire hindered his movements, and he had to go full defensive when the dragon breathed a stream of fire at him. Overhaul had to continuously replace the melted stone and metal to save the attacked flesh, but this came at the cost of shrinking his size. So, he used the blunt weapon he formed in his right hand and launched it at the flying animal through the flames. Miraculously, the fire didn't melt right away, and it hit the dragon, causing him to fall out of the air and hit the ground. Overhaul clapped his hands, snuffed out the wall of flames, and ran up towards the dragon, who managed to dodge his slow yet powerful attacks. Torchwick bit at his legs, ripped off chunks of flesh and stone away until enough was gone to use his tail to spin and whip it out from underneath. The colossal mass fell, but was picked up by the several smaller tendrils. The other foot was used to kick the dragon's back. Once he grew a new leg, Overhaul charged at the dragon and body-slammed him against a building that nearly fell over. Torchwick fought back with teeth and claws, ripping and tearing away at anything he could grasp until he saw Overhaul's actual body in the center of the horrible mass. He narrowed his eyes and charged up a fire breath, only for one of the massive arms to grab his throat and stop the attack. Once pinned, Overhaul turned his club hand into a mishmash of sharp blades, looking like a morning star with knives attached. Ready to strike the creature for good, he gloated on his victory. "You thought you could arrest me, animal? This will be the first and last time you do this to me. After I finish killing you, I'll kill that doctor and take back the girl," he yelled at the struggling animal. However, just before he could run his weapon through the animal, his arms was caught by something, and a lot of little things were climbing up his legs. Looking down, he saw a sight that nearly turned him blood cold, and hundreds more climbing up and ripping pieces off his body. He began to fight off the 8-legged invaders, but quickly found himself losing grip on the dragon until he broke free and used his fire breath to cut the limb that was holding him back clean off. Overhaul couldn't train his focus on two places, and this indecision allowed the animal to work in a group. The spiders held down his feet and hit through it enough to where Torchwick grabbed the monster, ripping off its legs into the air, where it breathed a line of fire right on it before lifting it several 100 feet and dropping it to the street below. That's when the spiders surrounded it, holding Overhaul down with webs and taking chunks of softer chunks to firm his body. That's when Overhaul caused his body to shoot spikes from every place and quickly formed new limbs to break the webs and stand up. But from all this, Overhaul had significantly shrunken down. Now he was as tall as Torchwick when he stood up. This made his fight even more troublesome, especially since his objective was just within reach, hidden behind a massive sack of medieval flying meat. While they fought, Mount Lady, Deatharm, and Camus Woods ran towards the kaiju-esque fight, since they were the closest heroes to the scene. When they got in range, they saw how things were progressing, and became understandably confused. Hold the phone. I thought the report said that the meat thing was over 150 feet tall. But now it's either with me? Mountain Lady observed from afar. Who cares how big it's supposed to be? Our only objective is to take it down and keep the city from getting any more wrecked, Deatharms tells her firmly. But before he could rush in to attack, Camus Woods held him back and told him, "Aren't you forgetting about the giant fire-breathing dragon fighting against the giant monster, and the spiders?" Mount Lady looked at the ground, saw the spiders, and began dancing on her tiptoes as she exclaimed, "Spiders? Ew, 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 gross! I didn't sign up for spiders!" The two men below were violently shaken by her stomping until Camus Woods jumped onto her shoulders and tried to reassure her. "Calm down, Mountain Lady. At your size, they are the size of normal ones. If you mean normal, you mean bird-eating Goliath tarantula-sized." She shot back sarcastically. "So, which do we fight first?" Deatharms broached the subject of their predicament. Camus Wood was about to suggest it until he saw Torchwick blow out a stream of fire against the giant's back, causing a considerable chunk to melt off clean. A chunk so hot that when it landed by some trees, it caused them to burst into flames. He shook with fear and affirmed, "Not the dragon." Then Mount Lady looked at the giant and observed, "Hey, I see something in the center of the giant's chest. Is that a person?" Camus Woods took out a pair of binoculars and searched the giant's chest. There he saw the face of a person, and recognizing it, he asked aloud, "Hold on, is that the Yakuza boss?" He focused closer and saw his plague doctor mask and said with surprise, "It is." "Welp, I guess we're helping the dragon." Deatharm shrugs. "Never thought I'd see the day when the dragon was the one who was fighting with the princess instead of kidnapping her." Deatharms rolled his eyes and tells her firmly, "Get your head out of the clouds and get ready to fight." The three heroes then run off to engage the monster. Mount Lady ran by herself, while Camus Woods swung by his arms and carried Deatharms. As they ran to them, Overhaul had managed to grab Torchwick by his wings and spin him around, throwing him at a building. Torchwick crashing, but managing to grab hold of the structure to keep himself from hitting the ground. Overhaul then turned both arms into sharp blades and ready to fire them. However, he never got a chance as Mount Lady drop-kicked him so hard that he fell to his side. As he tried to get back up, Camus Woods threw Deatharms at the giant human center. There, he flew towards the villain with a massive punch, but Overhaul saw this and created a cage of metal around him, leaving the hero to wail on it mercilessly. As the giant got up to its feet, Camus, with the aid of the remaining spiders, once again locked his feet into place as Mount Lady closed the giant's arms behind himself. Once fully restrained, Mountain Lady called out, "All right, Fireheart, let them have it." Torchwick complies and repositions himself at the building, clinging to its side. Suddenly, the air grew extremely hot, and the taste of metal and smell of brimstone filled the air. Steam began to come off Torchwick like a cloud. His dorsal spike, tail tips, and horns began to glow a bright red. A pool of bright red energy collected in his throat, making his scale tips grow bright red, and melting parts of the building he was attached to. There, his throat went from red to orange, then yellow, and finally white. There, the energy travelled up his throat like 3 rivers into his jaw. Mountain Lady very quickly realized what was going on and called out in panic, "Wait, not that much!" But Torchwick didn't listen. He took a deep breath in before opening his mouth at 180-degree angle and blast forth a stream of white hot flames. "Shit!" Mountain Lady cursed as she released the giant's arms and grabbed her friends and performed a Superman dive to get as far away as possible while also shielding her friends. The fire hit the giant, and Overhaul used every last bit of willpower of his force body to force a strike directly at the center of the blast to protect himself. The blast only lasted several seconds, but it felt like hours for both the heroes and the villains alike. "Hot, hot, hot, hot!" Mountain Lady complained, even though she was at a safe distance. The fire was so hot that she could feel it hitting her back as she tried to cool away. Unfortunately, the remaining spiders all burst into flames the moment the fire hit, leaving burnt corpses all over, that turned to ash. Finally, the fire died out, and Overhaul was reduced so much that he had no arms or legs to hold himself up by. So Torchwick took the opportunity to grab the misshapen torso and flew up into the air with it. He flew higher and faster, causing the burnt flesh to break off and fly away, leaving nothing but a ball of meat, stone, and metal where Overhaul was. The man then began to try and assimilate the dragon's flesh into his own, but once Torchwick saw this, he put a swift end to it. With a front flip and a swift whip of his tail, he sent the ball hurtling into the air and breaking up in the process. Overhaul finally broke out of his cocoon and began to panic. Without a big enough body, this fall would be his last, and with nothing else to manipulate, his chances were already slim. So he tried to pull in the rest of the materials that broke around him to cushion his fall. Once he fell, he'd simply do what he did at Nip and use the city around him to form an even bigger body. However, that plan never came to be, as Torchwick rocketed to where he was with his back arched. Overhaul remembered what he was after and hoped to catch a glimpse of the girl and boy, but instead of seeing them still riding the dragon's back, he saw something new in its place. 2 robots that looked far different than the ones he and his robots fought back at the beginning of their invasion. The 2 robots ran and jumped off the dragon. While positioning in the air, their limbs turned into blades and both came down on him. He heard the sound of something being sliced off cleanly, and at the same time felt control over the materials around him vanish. But instead of falling into his death, Torchwick grabbed him by his claw and dived him towards the ground. Torchwick landed with ease as an acrobat, allowing Overhaul to live despite some whiplash, and snarled at him. Overhaul then turned to touch the dragon, wanting to break it apart, but when he did, he couldn't see his own hands. When he looked down, every fibre of his being was telling him not to. He saw a horrific sight. His arms were sliced off at the elbow. Seeing his panicked face, Torchwick roared into the air, sounding off his victory as the weight of what Overhaul had lost hit him like a truck. Before he could begin to spiral, The two robots from before loomed over him. In each of their hands was one of his arms that they threw to his sides. Then one of them took out a splinter and used to morph into Izuku and Eri back again. It was at this moment that Overhaul realized he had been duped, but before he could have another emotional breakdown or die of shock and blood loss, the robots did something else. One turned their limbs into a torch, and the other turned their arms into a clamp. The one with the clamp arms pinched off his bleeding stump, and the other one burned them shut. The pain was enough to cause him inconceivable pain, enough to the point where he passed out. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is a 2-chapter episode. Woohoo! Yeah, but this is the end of the Yakuza invasion arc, like I said at the beginning of the chapter. Final part. Now we're gonna deal with the aftermath, and there's some cool. We're gonna. Do you remember Pacifica? Basically, people. We're gonna talk about Pacifica more after this arc because it got really busy. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.